Hey guys, Cliff Gray here with Flat Tops Wilderness Guides and True Hunts. Today I've made you a video on sharpening knives. I hope this is different than all the other thousands of knife sharpening videos out there, in the sense that it takes you through a process where you truly understand how a knife becomes sharp, how you keep it sharp, and the proper procedure to sharpening it, okay? This isn't going to be a step-by-step process that you see in other videos where it's, do 8 strokes on this side and then 8 strokes on this side. I'm not going to show you how to sharpen a knife that way, because I personally think that all that's going to do is get you kind of close to knowing how to sharpen a knife. In this video, I'm going to emphasize the actual kind of physics of how the knife gets sharpened and the procedure I use. And once a guy knows how an edge is actually created, they won't have any problem sharpening knives, all right? So that's why this video is going to be the last knife sharpening video you have to watch, all right? So this first section, guys, I'm going to get my little whiteboard out here, and I'm going to just go through the nitty-gritty of how to actually get the steel sharp. All right, so there's an inevitable problem that we run into, okay? And that's that we've got our dull knife. Okay, and that's it. As we take metal off one side, we don't know for sure if we're taking the same off of the other side, all right? Kind of the layman's way to deal with this is a lot of sharpening methods that I don't necessarily agree with, and how they do it is like count 10 swipes on this side, 10 swipes on this side, and you'll be pretty close, and that apex should be pretty good. I don't agree with that methodology, and you'll see that throughout this video. The best way for you to do this is to understand how the burr works, okay? So, we're going to start on this side with whatever sharpening method we're using. We're going to remove metal, okay? All right? And then we're going to come over on this side, and we're going to remove metal. All right? Okay? And in an ideal world, we're going to remove them at the exact amount, and there's an apex here, and the knife has retained its angles. It's perfectly sharp, okay? So that's in the hypothetical perfect world, but that's not how it actually works, all right? You're never going to actually get them perfect. So what you have to do is, when you do this, what you have to do is you're going to remove metal from this side, okay? And you're going to end up with a little burr here, okay? And that burr you're going to be able to feel on this side of the edge with your finger, and I'll show you how to do that on the actual knife. And so that burr is going to be pretty good at first, all right? Going to be very noticeable. So then what you're going to do is you're going to come back over here, and you're going to remove metal here. And as you do that, you're also going to take that burr off. So you've matched the burr, right? And so now you're getting that apex is built into the sharpening process now, but now you've still got this burr on this side, all right? This was our original one. I'll get that out of the way, okay? So you come in here, and you're going to sharpen with perhaps a smoother stone, a little less aggressive, and you're going to work the burr back a little bit, okay? But now the burr's getting smaller, all right? Okay? And so just for demonstrations, you keep doing that process. I won't show you the whole line, but you're going to move that burr off. It's going to be on this side, okay? You're going to move it off. Now you're getting down to a very fine polishing stone. You're going to end up with a little one, and eventually you're going to be able to work that whole burr off, and that's what's going to give you that perfect apex while maintaining the angles, okay? And so the nice thing about this way of thinking about it in sharpening a knife is that you can deal with the fact that the way we physically do things, there's just a little asymmetry in the world, right? A lot of guys that hand sharpen their knives, they're always walking around with a marginally sharp knife, and the reason is because it's just got a little burr on one side that they haven't gotten off, okay? So if they knew how to feel for that burr and knew what's going on, they could just do a couple extra strokes on this side and clean up that knife. They don't realize how close they are to a sharp knife, right? But you'll know that, okay? Because you'll know how to work that burr back and forth, all right? This is really important, And that little tidbit of understanding how that burr works is going to help you avoid a lot of frustration in your sharpening if you actually know how this process works, all right? So that's the first thing you have to understand. Now I'm going to show you a couple kind of pitfalls that guys run into. All right, so the first pitfall that guys run into is basically they just walk around with a knife that has a burr on it, right? And this comes from the fact that we're just asymmetric. Our movements are asymmetric as human beings. We can't do things perfectly. All of our movements aren't going to be exact same pressure, exact same everything. So when I go to hone this knife, you know, if I do 10 strokes on this side, 10 strokes on this side, what's going to happen is, because there's asymmetry in how I do that, there's just no way to avoid it. I mean, come on guys, you know, like, one of your balls hangs lower than the other. There's just some asymmetry in how we do things. Because of that, generally, if you're just counting your strokes, you're going to end up with a little burr on one side of the edge, all right? So that's one of the problems you run into. All right, so now I'll show you the other problem that's pretty common, all right? Let's assume that this diagram here I've drawn is depicting the knife this way, right? So you're looking at the cutting edge of the knife here, all right? And then here's the handle, okay? So that's what you're looking at. So a lot of times what will happen is a guy or gal, when they first start sharpening their knife, you know, they field dress one animal, they quarter one animal, and then they hone it up. What they'll find is they get very good results, right? That honing or that medium grit or medium to fine grit field sharpener they have really cleans up the little dings in the edge, and they get a pretty sharp knife. And so they're happy with those results. And then after 3 or 4 more animals, after 3 or 4 more times of sharpening it, they start to realize they're not getting the knife sharp again. And what's occurring is, because of that asymmetry in how they do things, is yes, they're building a burr up on one side, and they don't realize it because they don't understand, you know, what a burr feels like and how to manipulate it. So there's a burr on the one side. So as I showed you before, you could just work that burr off with a couple of strokes on your sharpener on this side, right? But the problem is the asymmetry extends to another, kind of like at a second derivative level, in the sense that a lot of times you have asymmetry on you know, one side versus the other in terms of pressure, but you also have asymmetry in the tip of the blade versus the base of the blade. So a lot of times you have a small burr on the tip on one side, and then in here somewhere it'll actually flip on you, okay? And you'll have a burr like this. Most people that have trouble with a knife and really are frustrated with sharpening, if you feel their blades, what you'll have is you'll have a burr on one side towards the tip, and then as you get towards the base of the knife, you're going to have a burr on the other side, okay? And this can be really frustrating to people, because it doesn't matter which side they try to put more pressure on, they still end up with that asymmetry, all right? So it's important, as I show you this process and how I sharpen, doesn't matter what kind of sharpener you're using, that you understand that before you go from one side to the other, you need to uniformly get that burr, okay? You need to get the burr where it's not on both sides. You want it, before you switch sides, you need to have that burr uniformly on one side of the edge. Okay, that's a concept that you really need to understand, and you'll be a lot better at sharpening a knife, and you'll avoid a lot more frustration. All right, guys, so we'll jump right into the actual sharpening process, and I'll kind of show you some pitfalls that the guys run into, and I'll kind of keep hitting on this concept of understanding how a burr works in terms of actually sharpening your knives. All right, so I'm gonna use a whetstone, but you can use whatever sharpening method you wanna use, and it's gonna be, all these concepts are gonna stay the same. Okay, so I'm gonna start with my more aggressive grit stone. In this case, it's a 1,000 grit stone. You can, if you're interested in using whetstones, you can look up a bunch of videos on you know, different recommendations. These are just an inexpensive whetstone. Keep them wet, you soak them, all that process, but I'm not going to get into that. I'm just going to focus on the actual sharpening process. The first thing I'm going to recommend when you're learning how to sharpen a knife is start with a knife that's not super high quality. Generally, the higher quality knives and the more expensive knives are going to have a lot harder steel, And if you start with those, it's going to be very hard for you to understand the whole concept of a burr, because it takes a long time to build up a burr on a really high quality knife, all right? So like this is a Svord, at least that's how I pronounce it. This is a peasant knife. It's a $15 knife. It's kind of my little truck knife. And it's a great one to learn on, all right? Because it's got just a very simple profile blade, very easy to sharpen. Same deal with this buck knife. This is a buck 113. Same deal. This is actually my favorite blade profile for bear skin and that sort of thing, where I really want to keep be able to quarter the animal and all of that. But when I'm skinning, I can, with that profile of knife, I can really keep all the flesh on the meat and off of the hide. Okay, so this is actually a profile, blade profile that I use a lot in the field. But anyways, it's really simple to sharpen also. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is I'll start sharpening my knife on one side. All right, so I'll start sharpening my knife on one side. When I use the whetstone, I push. I tend to, and whatever you're using, the push is a lot easier to sharpen on than the pull. Okay, and so I'm going to just sharpen that side. I'm going to keep doing that. On my stone until, so I've been sharpening this way, and I'm going to get a burr on this side of the knife, okay? And I can already start to feel that just a couple strokes on the whetstone, and that's because this is a pretty soft metal that they use on these, or soft steel that they use in these knives. And so I'm starting to feel a little burr here on the bottom develop, but I don't have any burr here yet on the tip, all right? And that's the first thing you're going to realize, okay? You're going to realize when you do this and you start feeling for that burr, just that little, it's like it'll feel just like a little scratchy, and then as you build it up real good, it'll be very apparent. It'll be like a little chunk of wire on that side of the knife. What you're going to realize when you first start doing it, and I kind of recommend you do this, is just go and just do your, what you'd think you're getting the whole edge of the blade, right? Keep doing that, and don't feel the edge, okay? Just give it a bunch of strokes, okay? And then you think, okay, I've been sharpening the whole edge, and feel where that burr is. What you're going to find is the burr is going to be very pronounced in one section of the blade, and probably non-existent or just barely starting on the other end of the blade. For me, I tend to sharpen in a way that I can feel the burr on the base of the blade before I feel it on the tip, right? So I adjust my sharpening to make sure that I get the burr starting to develop on the tip too. So a lot of times, if I feel that, that kind of asymmetry where my tip does not develop in a burr, I'll just do several strokes where I'm just working the tip of my knife, okay? And there's nothing wrong with that, okay? There's no rule in knife sharpening that you have to do the whole blade whenever you're sharpening, right? So a lot of times what I'll do is I'll do that, and I can start to feel that burr now, and it's starting to be pretty consistent with the base of the blade, the burr there. And then once I have that, I might do a couple full strokes and go all the way down the blade just to smooth out, any kind of interruption that I've put in there by just working the tip. But before I go to the other side, I want to feel that burr along the entire edge, okay? All right, until you do that, do not flip over your knife. Don't just count strokes and then flip over your knife. You want to feel that little burr along the whole edge, all the way to the tip, okay? So I feel that, so now I'm going to go ahead and flip. I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And like I said, you don't have to be doing this on the whetstone. Whatever sharpener you're using, the same concept holds, right? Okay. Okay, so now I feel a little burr developing on this side, right? It's consistent through the base to the tip of the blade. Okay, so then I'll flip it over. And this side I'm still using the same grit stone, but I'll do it just a little bit lighter. Okay. And then here, now that I know I've kind of created that apex between, you know, raising the burr on one side and raising the burr on the other side, now I'll be pretty light and I'll turn the knife over when I just feel just the tiniest little burr developing, right? I'll turn the knife over and I'll do it on this side. Okay, I'll do it a few strokes on that side, and I can start to feel the knife starting to get pretty sharp, and there's just a smidgen of a burr, okay? That's when I'll go to a finer grit stone or you know, whatever type of sharpener you're using. Okay, and then there, the same deal. As I get into the finer stones, now I'm less worried about the burr because I know that I've raised the burr on one side, raised the burr on the other side, and I've gotten that apex, right? And so now is when I'll just, you know, use light pressure, and I'll count my strokes. But this is the only time I do that, is down when I get to kind of more of my polishing stones. And that's because I can't use a burr to guide me because I'll be using too much pressure. So I'll just do that, and I'm just basically just, you know, polishing off that edge, removing any little chunks of burr that are there, okay? So I'll do that. The last thing I do is I basically strope the knife, or, you know, I don't use leather, so it's technically not going to be stropping it or whatever you want to call it. But what I'll do is I'll just take the knife, I'll lay it down on a fine stone, okay, on the kind of the heel of the blade, and I'll just pull back, and that'll remove any burr that I've developed in that polishing process, okay? One on that side, one on the other, and I'll do that a few times. And that if there is a burr that's just standing right up straight, a lot of times that'll peel it off, and that'll give you kind of that shaving sharp blade, okay? All right, guys, so I hope that kind of gives you a good feel for things, and I hope going through that nitty-gritty kind of theoretical stuff helps you out and helps you understand how to work that burr back and forth and get your knives really, really sharp.